Welcome to the Gateway to the Stars online program for September 2021. I am Ranger Richard, known as our Park Sky Ranger. Lights Out Heartland is a coalition of organizations in the United States heartland that is working to mitigate light pollution, which negatively affects wildlife as well as the night sky. For many years, Gateway Arch National Park has turned off the arch floodlights during the bird migration seasons, as the bright lights can be confusing and harmful to birds. As part of the City Arch River project that renovated the Gateway Arch grounds, new shielded pathway and pedestrian lights were installed instead of the old ball lights. These new lights aim a much greater portion of the light downward where it needs to go. In addition, the park has installed a sky quality meter to measure the level of light pollution on site. Of course, given Gateway Arch National Park's location in downtown St. Louis, it is no surprise that the results show that the level of light pollution is very high. However, our park is part of the larger National Park Service, and a great number of our visitors are from all over the country. We can help teach all of them about our mission. We are very glad to participate in programs that can help save migrating birds in St. Louis, sea turtles at Gulf Island National Seashore, or the pristine stargazing available at Bryce Canyon National Park. At this time, I will turn the program over to Mr. Don Ficken, who is the director of Dark Sky, Missouri.
Well, thank you and good evening. It's great to have another Gateway to the Stars program tonight. Again, as Rich Pfeffer mentioned, my name is Don Fick, and I'm director of the Missouri chapter of the International Dark Sky Association. IDA Missouri has been spearheading a group called Lights Out Heartland, which is a collaboration of organizations from several states working together to keep birds safe as they migrate at night. I also happen to be a member of the St. Louis Astronomical Society, which has been doing programs with the Gateway Arch for many years. So I'm very excited about tonight's program. Our program is really in two parts. The first part will focus on birds and light pollution. It'll be just about an hour or maybe a little bit less. And the second part will be a virtual tour of the night sky using from a park ranger. And it'll be about 15 minutes or so, but he does a really great job. And I think you really enjoy that if you stick around. By the way, if you happen to be near the Gateway Arch tonight and you're listening to Facebook, I encourage you to walk down the Arch grounds, because we have Rich Pfefferman, who is a ranger at the park, but also a member of the St. Louis Astronomical Society, will be down there with a telescope. And there, you can see the moon, you can see some planets. It's a really great night, a beautiful night, as it turns out, some blue skies here. And I think you'll enjoy the Arch grounds. So let's get started with our presentation. We actually have part one. We have two people that are presenting. One is Sharolyn Anderson from the Natural Sounds and Night Sky Division of the National Park Service, and Ann Tieber from the St. Louis Zoo. So what we're going to do is we're going to do these presentations back to back, one right after the other, and we're going to hold the questions to the end. So if you happen to be on Zoom, you can put your questions in the Q&A area. And if you happen to be on Facebook Live, you just type those in the comments area, and we'll be able to pick those up. And I think you're going to enjoy this program. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so let's get started. So I'm going to unshare. Well, actually, Sharolyn, you can go ahead and share your screen, and we'll kind of get going with you, I guess.
Okay.
I see your webpage right now. I see your.
Okay, that sounds perfect.
Okay, good.
So, hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be here today and part of this extremely exciting event. And I'm going to talk to you about what the National Park Service is doing overall. And we're trying to lower the light levels to support the environment and the visitor experience. One of the things that often happens is people ask, why does the Park Service care about the night skies? We're not astronomers. But if you look at the mission of the Park Service, it's actually there. The Park Service is there to preserve unimpaired the natural and cultural resources. And my division, which is the Natural Sounds and Night Skies division, actually looks at the sensory resources. And so we like to preserve the night skies, and we take a lot of work and effort in doing that, because we are trying very hard to preserve the enjoyment and education and inspire this generation and future generations. I think too, it's interesting to think back when you're looking at night skies that for millennium, the Earth has moved in this predictable manner of day, night, and annually, and lunar cycles. And all of this is occurred, and we've evolved doing that. And just in the last period have we, I would say the industrial age, have we started having lights at night outside. And that is interesting because here, if you look at this, trees lose their leaves in the fall, and I wish everyone a happy equinox. But this tree, if you look, it has not systematically or in any sort lost its leaves equally. And there happens to be a light. And what happens when when the leaves aren't falling at the same rate, in the same way that they have for millennia? Basically, if you get a snowfall, what happens is that the branches with the leaves on them are heavier and they're weighed down, they break off, and this harms the health of the tree. And these are the kind of things that we don't really understand. What happens using artificial light at night? And that's because it hasn't been millennia since we've had artificial light at night. In 2001, Fauci et al. Or Cesano et al. Came up with the first light pollution map in America. And they basically predicted what would happen, or what the past to the present. And I can tell you from the 2018 article by Driscoll et al. That this 2025 map is what our light pollution looks like today in 2021. And what's really going on is this expansive addition, this rapid increase of lighting in populated areas, and it turns out even in less populated areas. And there's this rapid increase of light at night. And like I said before, we're not really sure what happens. One thing we do know is that by changing out some of the lights that we've had, in this case, you can see on the left side, you have the HPS, or the high pressure sodium, that we've gotten used to, this warm kind of yellow light, and that are street lights. And then on the right side, we have half the street, or some of the street, has been replaced with LEDs. That's been very interesting because one of the things it's done is it's really reduced our energy consumption. And that's really good for climate change and fossil fuel use. And that's a great part of it. And that's something that they started to do right when LEDs came out. But the problem was that the spectra of the LED is very different than the spectra of the high pressure sodium. And what that means is, if you look here at the LEDs right here, you basically have what we call a blue peak. What this blue peak does is it seems to keep us in daytime light, and that has its own problems. And with all this change going on, one of the things that the National Park Service has done via our division is we partnered with and are working with the lighting industry. This industry is changing daily. So if you think about it, there's all this new technology. Every time you go out, there are new lights. They'll last longer. They're different colors, or different watts, different lumens, different lux, a lot of different parameters, and they're changing very, very quickly. In our division, we have two colleagues, or two workers, Dr. Young, I was going to say Dr. Li Wei Young. She basically is an astronomer, which we love having her. Sometimes we joke about the fact that she looks from the ground up and I look from the sky down, and we're looking at the effects of lighting pollution. And she's really on the committee that's looking at this estimation of sky glow. We're trying to find a way to estimate what is the effect and how big is sky glow happening. And Jeremy White, he's on the protected area and parks standards. And what they're trying to do is find and publish new standards that are for protected areas and for parks. Because what we do know is there's a huge amount, or I should say a lack of understanding in our science research. With that, another thing that our department is doing is we're looking at the research that's been going on. So this graph right here shows that from 1990 to 2020, basically, if you look at the peaks in the blue, this is the wildlife. This is all of the research that is peer-reviewed by the scientific community on the effects of artificial light at night on wildlife. And that includes, if you look down here at the other ones, that includes the effects on humans, plants. And we look at both the human review papers and the wildlife review papers. And what we do then is in the office, we look at these scientific articles and we synthesize them. And we find all of the ones that have pertinent information and that can help the parks with their management. Because what the Park Service does is we try to manage our parks with the best available science. But how do we keep up with that science? So what our division has done is they've created this synthesis of all the scientific literature that the parks can go to quickly and efficiently to find out what's going on. One of the review articles, I told you we find the review articles that came out in 2020 that we highlighted was Savenkia, and I'm sorry if I butchered that name at all. And what they found was that there is this effect. And what they did was they took 1,200 articles and they synthesized them down to 74, and they found out what are the effects on humans, mammals, avian, insects, aqua or fish, and botany, especially on trees. And what they found is there's quite a bit of science that is related to the effects of this. But what they also found, and I find the biggest finding of this, is that the potential system-wide, looking at the ecosystems and the broad impacts of artificial light at night exposure, the science is insufficient. We don't have enough science out there to make strong conclusions about this. We do know there's effects, we do know their impacts, but we need more research in that area. And one of the things about that is that the National Park Service does take on projects that we feel will benefit a number of parks. And so how did we do that with nighttime lights? Well, what we did was we took a parking lot and we painted it red. And we worked with Boise State University, a number of PhD students and master students, our department, at the Great Tetons at Calder Bay parking lot, and with Signify Lighting Company. And they came up with a really unique red light that we could replace all of the parking lights with these red lights. And the special thing about these lights is that they don't have a blue peak. So you can see a mild blue peak here, but really that's insignificant to the amount or the impact to the night skies, and especially to the night sky viewing. And we took these lights and we did a big experiment in 2019. And then again, we repeated it in 2020. And even though it was much lower in 2020 and there were a lot of different things, all of the impacts and the numbers were the same. And that's great. So this big experiment that we did basically was looking at bioacoustics and radio tracking. We were looking at insect traps, and we're looking at visitors' response, because one of the things we want to do is we want to make the park as great as possible, and we want to make sure that visitors have a great experience. And if we paint the parking lots red and the visitors are complaining, which is what we thought would happen, that's not a good experience for them, and we didn't want to do that. So we really needed to understand the social science perspective of this study, and we needed to know the impacts on the insects and on the bats, specifically for this project itself. You can look over here, we have a map. Here's Calder Bay. We have our parking lots, and then we have our control sites and our dark sites and our lit sites. And what we found in those sites was basically when we have white light in those sites, we have a higher count of insects. When we're using the red lights, we have a lower count of insects. And that is really, really good. But the best news in this study was that the visitors rated the red lights consistently higher. And that is super, because they actually felt that the red lights were better for their nighttime vision and for their wildlife conservation. So in this study, when we were using red lights one night or for 3 nights in a row, and then white nights for 3 nights in a row, we actually have conclusive studies that it didn't bother the visitors. In fact, they loved going out to their cars and being able to look up and see the stars. And I don't know about you, but when I go to a parking lot, I usually, my eyes like dilate, or not dilate, contract, and you can't see anything. And in this case, you can walk outside and your night vision remains your night vision. You're able to find your car and you can see the night sky. So this is just one of the research projects that we do at Natural Sounds and Night Skies. And like I said, I am really grateful to be the spokesperson for this great team that does a number of things at protecting our natural sounds. The sounds of birds in the morning and the evening, something that is so beautiful and so part of what we do. And I think that feeds in really nicely to our next talk. I can keep talking until Dawn comes back on. So yeah, I was really excited to be a part of this. And I really do think that the natural sounds and the birds and the migration and everything that Ann Tiber's going to be telling us is an exciting thing that will be going on. And I look forward to any questions at the end of her talk for both of us. And I'm really excited to hear her talk. So Dawn, I'm going to go ahead and mute now and turn off my.
All right, well, thank you very much. So let me move up to the other presentation. If you just hang on one moment, please. Are you guys able to see that okay?
Looks good.
All right, great. Well, we're very excited to have Ann Tiber from the St. Louis Zoo talking, and I'm going to just say a few things about IDA before I turn the presentation over to Ann. So the Missouri chapter of the International Dark Sky Association has been around about since 2018, but it's really part of a larger group that's been around since 1988, the International Dark Sky Association. I think that we have something like 65 chapters and certainly over 28 countries. It's a quite impressive organization worldwide. And of course, IDA Missouri is proud to be part of that effort. So there was some talk a little bit about the sky map, which is really a very interesting project that was put together just a few years ago. This is a picture of the United States. And the light is color coded, so you can see the green and the yellow and the red areas represent areas of light pollution. Of course, the black areas are not areas of light pollution. And this was in the late 1950s. And what's striking about this is when you start looking at the change over just a few years. So let me move this forward to 1997. So you can start seeing that the light is definitely coming from the East Coast. It's on the West Coast a little bit. So you can certainly see, if you can see my cursor in the middle of the country here, you can see Kansas City and St. Louis. There are a few black spots left in our Missouri state at that point, meaning there's very little light pollution in those areas. And this is 1997. So I'm going to move this forward to what's estimated for 2025. And I thought there was, I think one, 1997, 2025. You can see this is growing quite rapidly. And it's a phenomena that I don't think scientists really recognized until just a few years ago that light, what the heck's just light? What the heck, how can it hurt anything? But it turns out that it has significant impact not only on human health and of course crime and safety and all that type of thing, but also on nature itself. And so our Lights Out Heartland is really trying to bring that together to talk a little bit about how we can keep birds safe at night. As you'll learn here, that birds, when they migrate, they have problems, they get confused. And that's why we wanted to invite Ann Tiber from the St. Louis Zoo tonight to talk about some of the wonderful work that the St. Louis Zoo is doing And of course, everybody loves birds. Who doesn't love birds? And she'll try to bring this all together for us. And by the way, before I talk about that, turn it over to Ann. This is a picture of our focus on just the state of Missouri. You know, this is fairly recent. And you can see that when you focus in on it, pretty much the middle of the state's pretty much done for. You've got the northern part of the state up near Truman State, Kirksville, whatever else, has still got some dark spots, and of course down the southern part of our state. But don't be fooled. This is going away pretty quick, and this is why it's really urgent for us to take some actions right now. So Ann, I'm going to turn this over to you, and I'm looking forward to hearing your talk here. Just 1 second here, make sure that okay. Are you able to see this, Ann? Okay.
Yep, I'm good whenever you are.
I'm ready. You tell me when to go, and I'll go for it.
Fantastic. Sounds good. So thanks so much, Don, and thanks so much, Sharolyn, for the intro. It's what a great segue into talking about birds and how light really affects migrating birds. So I have to say, though, I want to give a big thanks to Don and another colleague, Jean Favara from St. Louis Audubon Society, because I have taken some of their slides and input them into this presentation. So this is a fantastic collaborative effort between a lot of entities. And so I really appreciate the slides that they've let me borrow from them. Jean couldn't be here tonight to present, so I am gonna do my part and her part and kind of pull it all together, at least from a bird perspective. So the title, Turn Out Lights, Save Birds, and how light pollution impacts bird migration is a really big thing. And we are now into fall migration of birds. And it is really, really important to really monitor our lights wherever you are. Don, if you could go ahead and advance the slide, that'd be great. All right, so even though I work for the zoo, I work with all birds, and we're going to start out this story by talking a little bit about penguins. And I know penguins, while they don't migrate and fly through the sky southward in the fall and northward in the spring, I did want to share a story that really brought all of this nighttime and light pollution, nighttime skies and light pollution sort of all the way around for me. When I was doing some penguin research in Peru, studying the Humboldt penguin, it lives along the coast of Chile and Peru, and along the coast of the Pacific Ocean. So we would go out literally in these little fishing boats that you see up here. And we literally would go out with our binoculars and we would count birds. This is a vulnerable species, and so we like to keep tabs on this type of penguin, because one climate event could make or break the population. But one of the interesting things I found was doing one trip out one year, we actually went about 25 miles out, and 25 miles in a little bitty fishing boat with a 25 to 30 horsepower motor on the back can take quite a long time to get there. And it took us literally 7 hours to get out to this island where we had heard penguins were. And we get out there 7 hours later. It takes us 4 or 5 hours to actually circumnavigate, because that's what we do with our binoculars and our tally counters. We count the penguins and then we head home. Well, by the time we got there and we counted, and then of course the people that were living on the island invited us to lunch. So, you know, not to be rude, we stayed for a quick lunch and then we decided to head back out. What that meant though was we were going to take the boat at night and head back to the mainland of Peru. Don, you want to advance the slide, please? And really it was eye-opening. What we saw was this. I had never seen a sky more beautiful in my entire life than when I was on that little fishing boat bumping along the Pacific Ocean heading for mainland Peru. And it was very much eye-opening. I'm a product of the city and suburbs of St. Louis, and you're going to find out later why St. Louis is such a hot spot for light pollution. But when I actually laid back in the boat as we were heading back, and it was probably 1 in the morning. This is what I saw. Now, this is not an actual picture from Peru. This is a stock photo that I took, but it was exactly the same. It was absolutely beautiful. I had never seen so many stars in my entire life. And this sort of stayed with me. And this was about 8 years ago. This has stayed with me up till today. And this was a great segue into talking about why light pollution is such a big problem in North America and Canada. Don, can you advance it? So what does light pollution have to do with birds? A lot. Lighting at night can really be deadly for migrating birds. Next slide. So bird migration, there's roughly 3 to 5 billion birds migrate through the United States and Canada every year in the spring and in the fall. Fall is usually a heavier group of birds because a lot of the adults and offspring also migrate south in the fall. 70% of North American species are migratory, and that's something that a lot of people don't know. And then 80% of those migratory birds migrate at night. And a lot of people don't know that either. But why do they migrate at night? Well, one, because it's cooler. They don't have to, use a lot of energy to cool down. They can just fly in the cool night air. They can avoid predators. A lot of those predators that are diurnal, when they stop, they can hide in their shrubbery and sort of, sleep during the day and then, take off at night for these long distance migrations. And one thing that really boggles people is that they use the stars and the moon to navigate. And they've done this for millions and millions of years. And it's really, really interesting. And if we were, had to pick apart the mind of a bird and ask them why they do this, it would be really interesting to find out. But they utilize those bright stars and the moon to navigate both spring and fall migrations. Next slide. So on their migration journeys, they face a lot of threats. And one, and I'm sure everybody probably is aware of this, loss of habitat. Loss of habitat is the #1 reason most animal populations are in decline. And in this case, North American songbirds or North American birds in general have lost approximately 70% of the native plants that they would normally find on their migration journey. And what that means is we've become a country of beautiful ornamental non-native or alien plants, if you will, that really serve no purpose to an ecosystem. It doesn't support a lot of invertebrates, it doesn't support a lot of birds, and it doesn't support what is really needed to fuel a lot of these birds on their migration journeys. Changing climate conditions, we all have heard climate change, but really this is more than just climate change. This is severe weather patterns, more El Niños, more weather events, severe weather events, hurricanes, and droughts, and downpouring of rain, storms. A lot of those changing climate conditions can really affect migrating species. And then the one that we're really going to focus on tonight are collisions. Birds collide with a lot of different things, buildings being the #1 thing they collide with. But they can also collide with electrical lines, turbines, offshore oil rigs. There's a lot of things out there that birds can collide with. But because of birds migrating through these large cities, through their migratory pathway, the most common things they collide with is buildings. Next slide. So in 2019, Cornell University and American Bird Conservancy published an article, and some of you may have seen this, that 3 billion birds have been lost since 1970. Now, if you think about it, this is 1 in 4 birds. If you look out your window during the day and you see a bunch of robins or cardinals or black-capped chickadees or whatever it is that's in your yard right then and there, bird species, that means 1 in 4 of those birds has disappeared. So that is drastic. If you look at the chart on the screen right now, that's a ginormous drop from where we were 40, 50 years ago. It's incredible. And this has brought to light a lot of problems and a lot of threats that affect our North American bird species. And we really want to address this problem. Otherwise, who knows, in another 30 or 40 years, we won't have some of these populations. Next slide. So when we talk about migratory birds, we first need to really understand the migratory pathways in the United States. And we in St. Louis live in the Mississippi Flyway. You can see Missouri there. And our birds will really literally follow from Canada. If they're as far north as Canada, they will follow that Mississippi Flyway down to Mexico and Central America. They follow that Mississippi Flyway because, and we get a lot of shorebirds, a lot of waterfowl through our areas because of the Mississippi River. It's a wonderful place for some of these birds to to continue their journey. They can rest along the waterways. They can refuel. They can hang along the shore banks until nighttime again, rest, refuel, and then take off and continue their journey southward. So we live in a really incredibly important flyway. These are all very important flyways, but Mississippi in general, because of the Mississippi River that flows so far down. Next slide. So also in 2019, another study published by Cornell, and this was eye-opening to me. I was not aware that this was ranked as deadly as it was, but St. Louis was ranked 5th in the worst city in spring migration and 6th in the fall, according to a university study on light intensity and bird migration intensity. And you can see on your screen where it's yellow and the bigger the bubble, those are the major cities. And so we rank just below Chicago, Dallas, Houston, and then New York in fall migration. So that's not something that we really want to be known for. St. Louis can be a very, very deadly place for migrating birds during spring and fall migration. And so this really sheds some light on what is really going on to these birds and why they're starting to disappear. And as we talked about, there's a lot of threats, one being light. Next slide, please. So bird collisions, as I said, we really want to sort of discuss the problems with bird collisions. And the top part is really, approximately 600 million birds are killed annually by building collisions. And that is really due to reflective surfaces or highly mirrored surfaces, like high rises can have the mirror imaging of sky and clouds. And to a bird, they don't perceive that as something in their flight path. If it's heavily mirrored, or if there's plants on one side or the other, a lot of times birds will try and fly in a light to that plant or that tree, but it's really reflection, and then they hit the glass, and then they usually perish after that, or they're very, very stunned after that. Some recover, some do not. The problem with light below that I wanted to talk about is that birds become disoriented by bright lights and what we call sky glow. And as we said, birds navigate by the moon and the stars. So having those bright lights, especially uplighting, is very disorienting to birds once they get caught into that sky glow. Birds will also navigate towards it, thinking that it's where they're supposed to be going. And if it's brighter than the moon and the stars, chances are they're going to fly right to it. A great case in point is the Twin Tower Memorial. The Twin Tower Memorial went up. Nobody knew how deadly this was really going to be when those lights shone straight up. So what happened was they were finding dead birds all around the memorial. And the local Audubon Society did a study and realized that millions, hundreds and thousands of birds are getting caught in these beams of light for hours on end. And so what they did was they did a study, they actually made some contacts, and now the people who run the lighting on that memorial agreed to turn it off for 20 minutes or so every time that the Audubon groups or the bird watchers that monitor that, because to this day, they monitor those lights, and they turn them down or turn them off once the bird counters count about 1,000 birds in those beams. And those counts are done every 20 minutes. So it's hard to believe that birds actually get caught in that. But when they get caught in that, they get very disoriented and they just fly around and around and around. And in some cases, they just drop from the sky from sheer exhaustion. Because remember, they're on their migratory journey. So they've already depleted a lot of their fueling supplies, and now they're caught in this sky beam that's shining straight up. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like. And all those little dots that you see in those beams are actually birds and bats and probably some insects. And so if you were to count all of those dots in there, you would come up with literally thousands of dots. And this is just a snapshot. So you don't really understand the scope of the problem until you see an image like this. And it really tells you how many, invertebrates, birds, and potentially bats get stuck in these uplighted beams that are just shining straight up miles and miles into the sky. Next slide. So another case in point was the Apple Store. In Chicago in 2017, Apple opened a new store. It was a brand new state-of-the-art store that also included lots of uplighting. Well, they got a lot of bad PR because birds, again, were literally dropping out of the sky during migration periods. And the local Chicago Audubon Society, again, did studies and also went to them and said, please turn your lights down. And this is just an image of one of the nights where birds are found along the Apple Store in Chicago. And this, I think sometimes it's so impactful to actually see the birds and the carcasses lined up. I don't think people understand the scope of the problem until you actually see how many lives, how many bird lives are lost just because you're lighting up a store or lighting up a building. And so we're not asking people to really turn off lights all the time. It would be great if everybody would do that, but to be especially mindful during migration periods. And if there's something you can do, such as shining your lights down or putting, deflectors on the top so they're not shining straight up into the sky all the time, that would be so beneficial. Next slide, please. So because of a lot of the losses of our North American bird species, in 2019, we also started the North American Songbird program within our Wildcare Institute. And our Wildcare Institute is sort of the conservation arm of the St. Louis Zoo. So I'm not sure how many of you know that we have a huge conservation arm, and we work globally. All around the globe we have conservation programs, whether we support them, whether we actually go out and do the field work such as my penguin work, but there's so much we can do here in our own backyard, and I felt very strongly about this. And so we actually started the North American Songbird program through our Wildcare Institute, and it does get some funding through our Wildcare Institute, but also our zoo, St. Louis Zoo, also belongs to a bigger entity called the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And that is a big organization that a lot of US and Canadian zoos belong to. And that is, we are rigorously accredited every 5 years. And so we have to keep our standards to where they need to be. Within the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, in the last 7 to 8 years, we started something called the SAFE programs. And SAFE really stands for Saving Animals from Extinction. And so what we were able to do with a collaboration of other zoos and aquariums in North America, we started the Songbirds Safe program. And it really focuses on North American songbirds, which are one of the most prevalent species that is found during bird collisions. Next slide, please. So what else can we do in zoos and aquariums? We can start our own Lights Out programs. As you heard Don say, there are many entities that are a part of our Lights Out Heartland, which is what the St. Louis Zoo is actually a program partner of. And Lights Out programs actually started in 1993 in Canada. And it started with something called FLAP. And that stands for the Fatal Light Awareness Program. And Canada decided to promote that awareness about birds colliding with buildings due to heavy nighttime lighting because they were really seeing some drastic decreases in populations. So after 1993, and probably within the next 10 years, Lights Out programs started popping up. And really, a lot of those were spearheaded by our local Audubon societies, our park societies, national parks. Some in zoos and aquariums actually started them, but really they're more of a collaboration nowadays because it takes a village to create this awareness and push it out amongst our communities. So now there are currently approximately 45 Lights Out programs in the United States and Canada. And as I said, most are collaborative projects. And the nice thing about these collaborative projects is you're not the sole one doing it. And everybody knows somebody else in some other entity. And so we see the program sort of growing exponentially, which is great, which is really what we're hoping to do, is to create awareness about how bad light pollution can be and how detrimental it can be to birds migrating in their spring and fall migrations. Next slide, Don. So Lights Out Heartland, as Don said, really is really just to bring awareness and to spread the education, honestly, of how you can help make our bird migration safer for the migrating species that come through. But it can also, as Don said, it can have a huge effect on our nighttime skies. So really, as Don said before, you know, Lights Out Heartland, our goal is to really turn off the exterior lights or put them on motion sensors. That's something that's so easy to do, particularly during May and September because of migration. And that's really to help those birds get safe passage between their nesting grounds and their wintering grounds. So below you can see the entities that are a part of this Lights Out Heartland program, and you can always learn more at lightsout.heartland.org. So this is a fantastic organization. They have a great website. You can also go there and you can actually certify your home, your building, your business as a certified dark sky residence. And it's really interesting on how you do it. And some of these items that you can do are so simple, which is really like putting your outside floodlights on a motion sensor, just like we just talked about, especially during migration periods. So it can be very, very simple to get your building, your business, or your home certified under dark skies. Next slide, please. So you want to help? What can you do at home? Well, we just talked about a few things you can do. You can reduce your external lighting. We all know people need safety, so we're not saying turn off all your outdoor lights. We're asking for you to sort of deflect them down, though. Can you deflect them towards the ground where people would be walking anyway? A lot of times these floodlights that people have, you know, just sort of flood outwards, and it really lights up everything, when really what you need to do is aim a lot of these down. You can also close your blinds at night. You know, if your lighting is on the inside, close your blinds at night. It just reduces more of the external lighting that is seen. What can you do at your workplace? First of all, you can spread the message, spread the awareness that you know, reducing light pollution, you know, saves energy, it can save birds, it can do a lot. And sometimes that really just means closing the blinds at your workplace if the lights are left on for custodial services at night. Or it could mean that, your business has lights on that could be turned off. They don't really serve a purpose, but nobody's actually really thought about it before. So really spreading the awareness. And again, you can go to the lightsout.heartland.org website to get more information and really help us spread the message. Help us spread the message that birds are valuable. Once you lose a species, you can't get it back. And once you lose a species, that degrades the ecosystem further. So you take one species out of that chain of the ecosystem, it affects everything else. And so we really want to try and help give these birds safe passage, and reducing our lights and light pollution can really help. And I hope everybody is able to stay on this this event after the talks, because I think, seeing the night sky is going to be so fantastic afterwards, and I'm really looking forward to it. Next slide. So thanks for being here today. And I wanted to again say thank you again to Don from IDA and the Missouri chapter, and to Jean, who couldn't be here tonight from the St. Louis Audubon Society, because I think this is a great collaboration. We couldn't do this by ourselves. And it's so much easier when you have collaborative efforts. And so, the St. Louis Zoo works very hard to protect our native bird species as well, and our Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So thanks so much for being here, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And Sharolyn, I think, is on here as well still, and so is Don. So we're happy to take any questions. Thanks again.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ann. That was really awesome. I will say that a couple of years ago, I had no idea that light was even an issue, much less having an issue on birds or other kinds of places like that. And what I've learned, I guess, is I've even got into the birds that insects, for example, are significantly impacted by that. And so insects are obviously food for birds and all that kind of stuff. Do you guys focus a little bit on the insect side, Ann, as far as what you think about?
We do. In fact, we actually, within our Songbird program, we collaborate with, there's a safe program for monarch butterflies. And so we collaborate a lot on how to, talk about changing out your white lights for yellow insect-friendly lights so that you don't lose as much insects, and how we can create, pest-free areas and native plants for helping those monarchs, because they migrate as well. And so helping those guys, migrate down, and we have a lot of the same messaging. And so we do for our invertebrate community as well. So absolutely. And that's something so simple, is to change your white light bulbs with insect-friendly yellow light bulbs. If you have to have lights on, pillar lights outside, change them to yellow. You can get them. They're like, I think, $3 at Home Depot or someplace. And it's a really quick and easy way to help insects as well.
And I know we're talking about helping birds here, and obviously insects, but also people kind of like that yellow light better than those bright white lights. I mean, it doesn't take too many prompts so that somebody will start saying, I hate those white lights in my face, particularly if I'm driving with really bright headlights. So Sharolyn, what about what you've got going on in your area? You do some really fascinating work. So how does all this fit in what Ann said? It sounds like that would resonate with you, right?
Absolutely. Our division does a lot of work, and, we do kind of like they're looking at the lights and the birds in the Twin Towers. We've been working with some researchers that look at the insects in light to try to count and find out, because it's true. And one of the other things that happens with nocturnal birds is that when the lights are on, the animals go in that area, and then it's like a preserve. And that's the problem with the effects of light. We don't understand. And I love what you said about the ecosystem, right? So you might think, this is great, all the rabbits go into the parking lot. Well, the owls don't like to go in the parking lot. So then the owls can't eat what they would normally have as food. And then people are like, oh, but that's great for the bunnies. But then, and it's this cycle that we just don't understand. And insects, because of the base of everything. And my boss always says that, if you were to walk outside and you look down and you saw, 10 dead birds, or you saw 10 baby turtles, you would freak out and you'd change your light tomorrow. But when you see 100 insects, your brain just says, oh, whatever. And that's where we're trying. I love your messaging, because those insects are feeding those birds, and those birds are then working with the turtles, and there's this whole thing that goes in and out. And it's so exciting to have your zoo and these lights out things happening, because it's so hard to get that message out there. And it's so hard when people look down and see the insects and no feeling happens. But if they saw a bird, be a huge feeling. And so what ignites that need to change the lights? And like you said, the color, if you go to IDA and you go to their website, they have a lot of really easy things. Only use light when you need it. Make sure it's on task. Where is it you're pointing? Exactly what you said. So I think there's so many resources out there, and IDA does a beautiful job, and it has great public documents and pamphlets and brochures. Just learn more, because the more you learn, the more you don't know, and it's just exciting. It's such a great field to know. You turn out your lights and you can help the birds. How easy is that?
Yeah, it's one area of light pollution. Light pollution is one area that's actually pretty fixable. Whereas you might have maybe your land is messed up, or maybe you have oil in the water or whatever else. Light means you simply turn it off and it stops. Now, the repercussions of the habitats and the ecosystems, it takes a while to recover, but the actual pollution itself can stop immediately. And what I think about, and it's kind of hard to sometimes recognize, but when we go inside at night, many people just go inside, they can pull down their shades and go to sleep, but animals and birds and all that, they really can't. They are living whatever you see. If you think you would sit in maybe a retailer's parking lot at night and sleep, that's kind of what they're facing quite often. So it really does make a lot of sense to make a few changes. And, all those changes really add up. It takes really everybody jumping in there, right?
I think it's very interesting. Like, again, when I started out this presentation with my trip in Peru, I don't think people really understand, especially people and children growing up in these big cities.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand what a night sky really is like, unless they go to the planetarium, or unless they have, parents that do a lot of hiking and really get out into nature. Because growing up in these big cities, this city glow, this sky glow is incredible for miles and miles. And so it was so impactful for me to see how bright a night sky really is when it's just moon and stars. And it was incredible. I could see my colleagues on either side of me. It was so bright. It wasn't pitch dark, but the glow of the stars was just fantastic, like something I'd never seen. I mean, it just gave me goosebumps. I had never seen anything like it before. And I think that's what a lot of people that live and grow up in these big cities never get the chance to see. So I think they don't really realize how beautiful a night sky can really be. And I think people are just, I think when they think of safety, they think big sky floodlights. And instead of really thinking about shining them down or how they're utilizing those safety lights, I think they just buy them and put them up. So again, I'm always I'm one of those people that wants to give the benefit of the doubt to people. And I think they just don't know. They simply don't know. And so it's our job to hopefully, throw out these facts and really give some great information and help spread the awareness and educate, because I would have never known this as a young child. But going out and seeing the stars was just something I'd never forgotten. So.
Yeah, I think as parents, I can say that most people that I talk to over some age, whatever, can remember when they were young and they would go see the Milky Way, and they have many stories to tell. And I'm afraid right now we're going to have a generation that's never going to really experience that at all. And so they not only don't experience the night, but they also don't experience the nature that comes along with that. And they become, it's really something that they don't even know what they're missing, if that makes sense, right? So.
Exactly.
All right. Anything else that you guys would like to add to what this is such a great conversation. Both of you, or presentations by both of you. I mean, obviously we're talking about the national parks, we're talking about the St. Louis Zoo, and we're talking about a very common thing, which is the birds and light and habitats and insects and all that type of thing. But it's something I think that hopefully the message resonates with anyone that's listening. And of course, we've recorded this and we'll be placing this out on on Facebook and other places for people to watch in the future. So we really thank you, both of you, for doing such a terrific job. Any last parting comments before we move on to our next segment here?
I don't think so. Thanks for having me, Sharolyn.
Yeah.
It was great. I loved your talk, and I'm going to contact you about those red lights. I think that's a fantastic research study, and I'd really love to hear more about it.
So one of the great parts of this is that we get to chat before we get with you guys that's listening tonight, and get to share good war stories and best practices. So that's really cool.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, great. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to switch this over to basically we have a little video here. Now just give me a moment to cue this up.
Hello again, everyone. I am
not that one. Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, if you ladies can make sure that you're going to be able to hear this okay, just 1 second. I'll give a short test and confirm with me if you can.
Hello again, everyone.
Are you hearing that okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Ranger Richard, the Sky Ranger at Gateway Arch National Park. For the next 15 minutes or so, I am once again going to take you on a tour of the September night sky using a program called Stellarium, which gives a realistic view. When you go out and see the stars, be sure to put on some bug spray at this time of year and try to find a dark spot away from nearby city lights. Everything I'll be talking to you about is bright enough to be seen pretty easily with your unaided eyes, but if you have a pair of binoculars, it can't hurt to bring them along. If you have a lot of glare from lights or the moon is pretty bright in the sky, the binoculars can help you spot some dimmer stars. So, we will now switch over to the Stellarium View. As usual, we will start in the west, just as the sky is getting dark. This is because Earth's rotation will soon cause anything in the west to sink lower and soon set. If you could find a spot without a lot of trees or buildings to the west, it will be very easy to spot brilliant Venus as soon as 20 or 30 minutes after sunset. The view right now is set for September 9th, and you can see that the moon is nearby. Keep in mind that this simulation causes bright objects to appear larger. The real Venus will appear as a very bright star in the sky. Look closely and you can see the outline of the unlit part of the moon. This is due to sunlight reflecting off the moon onto the Earth and then back again. Binoculars show this Earth shine even better. With each night, the moon moves to the upper left and appears to thicken due to its orbit around the Earth. The next bright star visible above and to the right of Venus is Arcturus. It looks a bit yellowish orange if you look closely. We'll now set the time a little later to make the sky darker. As we do this, you will see Venus setting in the west as we talked about before. As we look very high in the sky in the early evenings of September, you can see the three stars of the summer triangle. Brightest of the three is Vega, which is a noticeably bluish color if you look closely due to its hot temperature. To the left is Altair, not as bright but still what we call a first magnitude star. Altair is one of the nearest stars to us at a distance of 16 light years, while Vega is still close at 25 light years away. The third and brightest member of the summer triangle is Deneb, almost straight up in the sky. Although it appears to us as the dimmest of the three, it's almost unimaginably far away. Deneb's light takes about 2,600 years to get to your eyes according to current estimates. If you look to the lower left of Deneb, you get to the middle of a line of 3 stars that we can see here. And then if you continue to the lower left to this star here, you have a pretty good northern cross in the sky, or the stick figure of a bird, Cygnus' swan, in fact. Let's bring up our constellation art to see the figures that the ancients imagined in the sky. We have talked in previous months about the mythology of Cygnus and Lyra the harp, but not yet about Aquila the eagle. Although it's harder to make out the eagle than the swan, on a clear dark night, or perhaps if you bring out the binoculars to spot the dimmer stars, you could see Altair and the stars around it making up the head, and then the outstretched wings and the tail of the eagle, as you can see here. The celestial eagle appears in many stories and mythology. Zeus, the king of the gods, kept Aquila as his pet eagle to carry his thunderbolts in his beak. Zeus once sent the eagle to swoop down and capture the shepherd boy Ganymede to serve as cupbearer to the gods, and maybe more. As we go back to our more realistic view, you can still find the celestial scorpion and archer low in the southwestern sky. Scorpius's curved figure looks pretty graceful, while Sagittarius looks more like a teapot in the sky, complete with spout, lid, and handle. If you can get to a dark enough location, you could see that when we look in this direction in the sky, we are looking at the center of our Milky Way galaxy, visible as a band of light across the sky. This is the best time of year to see the Milky Way in the evening sky, but you have to get to that dark spot. Farther to the left in the southeastern sky are our other 2 planets. Jupiter is much the brighter of the 2, second only to Venus in brightness in the sky. Jupiter's 4 largest moons and some cloud bands in its atmosphere can be seen in a telescope. The moons are similar to Earth's moon in size, and you could see them with your unaided eye if they weren't so close to Jupiter. You may see some of Jupiter's 4 largest moons in a good pair of binoculars if you hold them steady. The next bright star-like object to Jupiter's right is Saturn. To me, Saturn's steady, somewhat yellowish color gives the impression of great distance, and indeed it is about twice as far as Jupiter, almost 1 billion miles away. As seen in a good telescope, Saturn's rings are a beautiful sight, as you can see here. There we go, Saturn and its rings. If you'd like to see the real Jupiter, Saturn, and the Moon in a telescope and not virtually here, come to one of our last 2 telescope viewing sessions at Gateway Arch National Park. If skies are clear enough, volunteers from the St. Louis Astronomical Society will be out with telescopes on our West Entrance Plaza from 7 to 8:30 p.m. on 2 Saturday evenings, September 18th and October 16th. Now, Jupiter, Saturn, and the Moon look just fine as seen from the Gateway Arch, but I have to admit that we do have more than our share of light pollution given our location right in the middle of downtown St. Louis. In fact, light pollution is a big enemy not just to stargazers, but it can have a very bad effect on birds and other forms of wildlife. Lights Out Heartland is a coalition of organizations in our area that work to reduce light pollution. We have a special online program that will be streamed on Facebook Live at 6:30 p.m. on September 18th to discuss what the St. Louis Zoo, Dark Sky, Missouri, as well as the National Park Service are doing to address this important issue. If you would like to attend the telescope viewing at the Arch that evening, you can watch the video of the Lights Out Heartland program at this page, www.facebook.com/STLastro, beginning on the 19th. As we return to our sky view, here is the sky view. You can see that the Moon will be passing through the area of Jupiter just after the middle of the month, as we see here. The Moon on the night of the 16th, just below Saturn, closer to Jupiter on the 17th, and then continuing on as the Moon orbits the Earth. Finally, we'll shift our gaze to the north. You'll need a spot with a fairly open view to the northwest to spot the Big Dipper. These 4 stars form the bowl, and these 3 the handle. You could follow the arc of the Big Dipper's handle to the bright star Arcturus. Like this here. The 2 stars in the bowl that are farthest from the handle point to the North Star Polaris. The stars of the Little Dipper extend to the left, but they're much harder to see from near the city. Try with binoculars. These 2 on the end are fairly bright, and they're known as the Guardians of the Pole. If your sky is blocked too much to spot the Big Dipper, you could also use this group of stars to find north. It is Cassiopeia, and it looks like a W or an M on its side. As the hours pass, watch how Earth's rotation causes all of the stars to wheel around the North Star, and how Cassiopeia eventually appears overhead while the Big Dipper reaches its low point and then starts to rise again, right now around midnight in the middle of September. Eventually, Dawn will start to light up the sky, and you'll notice how the Big Dipper and Cassiopeia have almost changed places since the early evening. Dawn? Time flies when you're having fun stargazing. It's time to end this tour of the sky and get some sleep. See you next month.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And that was a fun video. And this is going to wrap up, I think, our program tonight. Don't forget October 16th, just check the Arch, Gateway Arch Facebook page for details about our next program next month. And it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate Ann and Sharolyn joining us tonight, and Rich Pfefferman, who's been behind the scenes, and he's actually out there tonight working with folks, looking at the beautiful night sky with a telescope. And so he's got the fun job tonight to be outside in the open air and enjoying this great evening here. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll have a video posted tomorrow on the St. Louis Astro Facebook page, so that if you missed this, you can certainly listen in once again. So thank you, Ann, and thank you, Sharolyn, and good evening.